All right, let's jump right into this explainer. When most people hear the name Socrates, they instantly picture this static, crumbling marble bust sitting in some quiet, dusty museum. Ancient history with absolutely zero relevance to modern life, right? Well, today, we are going to completely shatter that image. We're uncovering a provocative, street-level rebel whose life ended in a massively dramatic tragedy. This is a philosophical biography that's honestly just as thrilling as it is foundational to the way we think today.
And it all really hinges on this fascinating core mystery. Think about it. Athens was the ultimate beacon of intellectual pursuit, the cradle of democracy. It was a city that supposedly prided itself on logic and wisdom above all else. Yet, when push came to shove, they actively chose to execute their most brilliant native mind. So we really have to ask ourselves, what exactly makes a philosopher so incredibly dangerous that his own community decides he literally needs to be eliminated?
So let's set the stage with part 1, a philosopher on trial.
Picture this. We're dropping right into the middle of the action, right at the peak of the golden age of Athens. You have a man who is 70 years old. At that advanced age, this physically unkempt, famously barefoot guy is standing before a massive Athenian jury, facing the ultimate penalty. He wasn't some powerful politician, he didn't have wealthy aristocrat friends or expensive lawyers. He was just an elderly man who had spent his entire life chatting with everyday people in the marketplace, and now he's defending his very life against the organized machinery of the state.
Now, the irony is literally off the charts here. On one hand, you have these formal, terrifying charges brought against him, corrupting the youth and impiety, which basically just meant he wasn't showing proper respect to the gods of the city. But if we look at his actual actions, the guy wasn't plotting a violent rebellion. He was just encouraging relentless critical thinking. He simply taught young people to ask, why? And to a fragile establishment, that was viewed as a deeply corrupting and unforgivable act.
Which brings us to part 2, the gadfly of Athens.
He wasn't just born a legendary thinker. His life was totally shaped by the intense, chaotic environment of Athens. He even served bravely in the military during the grueling Peloponnesian War. But the real spark, that came from the Oracle of Delphi. The famous oracle bizarrely declared that no one was wiser than Socrates. And Socrates, who firmly believed he knew absolutely nothing, set out to question all the supposedly wise men of Athens, just to prove the oracle wrong. That single, relentless pursuit put him on the exact collision course that led straight to his trial.
To really grasp how he operated, we have to look at his own self-proclaimed title, a gadfly. A gadfly is someone who aggressively interferes with the status quo by posing novel, potently upsetting questions. Think about an actual bug, a literal gadfly. It's an annoying, biting insect that stings a large, sluggish horse just to wake it up. In this scenario, Athens was the lazy horse, and Socrates completely embraced this persona, buzzing around the comfortable, self-satisfied elites and relentlessly stinging them by challenging their most deeply held beliefs.
Let's unpack exactly how we pulled this off in part 3, the Socratic method explained.
He totally weaponized active dialogue to break down assumptions, and his playbook was pretty brilliant. It always started with the deceptively simple foundational question, like, hey, what is justice? Or what is courage? Once the so-called expert gave their overly confident answer, Socrates swooped in to step 2, exposing contradictions. He'd ask this series of gentle, probing follow-up questions that subtly guided the expert into trapping themselves in a logical paradox, proving their original definition was totally flawed. The ultimate goal wasn't just to be a jerk and embarrass them, but to clear away false knowledge so they could actually arrive at a genuine, completely new understanding.
Basically, by turning questions back on his listeners, he acted as a psychological mirror. He forced them to actively examine their own messy logic. He didn't preach, and he certainly didn't give long, boring lectures. He just held up this mirror of logic, and by doing so, he routinely exposed the ignorance of powerful, boastful men right in front of the entire public. And yeah, as you can probably guess, publicly humiliating the elite is a very dangerous game. His absolute commitment to questioning everything made him a living legend for sure, but it also unequivocally sealed his fate.
And that leads us to our final chapter, part 4, Hemlock and Enduring Legacy.
So, the jury finds him guilty, but get this, they actually gave him the opportunity to suggest his own alternative punishment. He could have chosen exile, or simply promised to shut up and stop his public questioning. Instead, staring down a death sentence, he remained completely unyielding. He delivered a statement that is literally etched into human history. The unexamined life is not worth living. He essentially told the jury that if the price of staying alive was to stop seeking the truth, then life simply wasn't worth the trouble. That single uncompromising stance cemented his legacy forever.
And so, the state carried out the sentence. It wasn't some violent public spectacle, though. It was a quiet, self-administered death. When his own friends begged him to escape into exile, he flat out refused. He drank the poisonous hemlock. He stayed absolutely true to his own principles until his very last breath, choosing execution over abandoning his role as the great questioner. His death ultimately became the final, undeniable validation of his entire life's work.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we've seen how a 70-year-old man chose death rather than stop asking questions. We've seen how his simple conversational method completely shattered the illusions of his society. And it really leaves us with a profound, almost uncomfortable challenge to look inward. Are you truly examining your own life today? Are you actively questioning your own assumptions, or are you just coasting, accepting the status quo? The Socratic Legacy isn't just dusty ancient history. It's an active challenge to all of us, right here, right now. So keep asking the big questions.